Well, hello there. How are you? So glad you could join us. This is our initial launch of Your Life Reimagined group training. I have a wonderful guest here today, but first, before I bring her in, I want to talk to you about this amazing bracelet. Our sponsor today is Sharon Bevan, an independent consultant with Touchstone Jewelry. And this is a really beautiful wrap bracelet that she sent me to talk about. And because my wrist is a little bit small, I had to get creative with it. But there's two different pin snaps that you can do to adjust size for your own wrist. I love it. It's got a lot of sparkle to it, and it's very, very, very up my alley, if you will. The bracelet is from Touchstone Crystals by Swarovski, and it continues to sparkle or to add sparkle to people's lives with Touchstone Crystals, their fastest growing social selling business. Now, you can reach out with the link that I'm going to have in the description of this video to make a purchase through our Fall Sparkle Party that will be open all month long. And then at the end of the month, I will be picking someone from this group who has made a purchase to donate all the hostess perks and points to. So you're going to get my free treats as well for your Halloween. All right. So thank you so much, Sharon, for hosting, or excuse me, for sponsoring our first inaugural broadcast today. And by all means, everybody reach out. These are amazing. These are so sweet. And I'll be honest with you. I'm looking at getting the Christmas ornament because it's beautiful. Go check it out on the link yourself. All right, so today I am going to introduce to you a woman who has become an actually pretty good friend of mine over the course of the last few months. And I love the work that she's doing with hoarding. And because of the fact that many people who join the military often do so to escape difficult childhoods. One of those difficult childhood situations may be like hers in that she grew up in a house where her parents were hoarders. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how that informs how you look at life and then what you can do about it if you have a similar situation. So let me introduce to you, please, Miss Tammi Moses, Hoarding Recovery Consultant over at The Hoarding Solution. Thanks so much for joining us today, Tammi. How are you?
Hi, Gail. Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. I'm doing well. I have coffee.
Yes.
My smaller vat today, but
There you go. That's awesome. So, tell me a little bit. I know that this weekend coming up, you will be visiting your parents again, and you haven't for a long time. That's correct?
I the last time I went was July,
Mm-hmm.
and prior to that it was February. So I do in general kind of spread it out a little bit. My dad died about a little over 5 years ago, so now it's just my mom there. Um, but the interesting part is that I do enjoy visiting her.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a challenge when it's not a Hallmark home, if you will.
I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that.
Yes.
Right? Awesome. So, well, what made me curious about that is what kind of feelings does that bring up when you have to consider, okay, I gotta go visit mom, and how have those feelings changed over the years since you started working on developing what you do?
Well, I would say initially, um, as an adult, I pretty much joined the military and avoided it for quite a while. And when I moved back to where I live now, I'm about 3 hours from where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And so initially, I always felt this obligation, like I needed to go there and solve their living problem. Although it had been that way for a long time, and how was I going to just jump in and intervene? Mm-hmm. And so through therapy and journaling and mindset work, I finally got to the point where I realized that I was a separate person. I could step in and try to assist, but it wasn't ultimately my responsibility to fix something I actually did not create. And that took a lot of work. And had I not done some of those things, I don't think I'd be talking today publicly about hoarding, because it's not something I ever thought I would A, talk about, and B, talk about it publicly.
Globally, on the internet.
Globally, on the internet. My guests on my podcast are from the UK. Like, how, what?
Yeah.
But
you know what, before you get into the next part, I just want to take a second and highlight what you just said. In big gold letters. This is not something for you as the child of a hoarder to fix. It's not your responsibility to fix somebody else's problem, right?
And the thing is that even if you want to, you probably can't. Mm-hmm. And it's that way in any dysfunctional situation, because honestly, change comes from within, and you cannot force someone else to change if they haven't dealt with their own issues, if they aren't prepared, or if they think they don't have a problem, mm-hmm. which is very common in most addiction situations.
And that's what hoarding is, isn't it? It's an addiction to having your things around you.
And it's like a protective measure. It's like a coping mechanism. And if you rip that away, that person feels even more vulnerable.
Yeah. And
most of us have some sort of protective space, mm-hmm. Especially I think if you have gotten yourself out of dysfunction, you've gotten out of that shame and humiliation and pain, essentially. Like, you've done a lot of work to get out of that. And so the thing is that, like, as our parents age, there's an expectation that we'll come in and help them, no matter what that means to you personally. And I think that is very hard if you're dealing with a parent who drank or used drugs or abandoned you emotionally or financially, or, whatever that trauma is for you. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult for you to say, oh yeah, I'm going to just run over here and help this person who thinks they don't have a problem fix their problem.
Right. So
and there's kind of that irony in that.
Yeah. It's the unsolvable problem. It's the impossible task. But it doesn't keep us from flying too close to the sun sometimes, does it?
That's true.
So we can get to explore, maybe touch a little bit on the fact that it's not your problem to fix. So then what can we do? The areas for us as children of this situation, I think you already alluded to it. One of the first things to step into is, dealing with your own shame about that situation.
Right. And like you take it on as though it's your own, because if you're the kid, say you're the kid going to school and you're riding the school bus and somebody sees where you live and they say, why don't you clean it up? Or maybe your clothes aren't washed, and so someone will make a comment about your clothes, and it makes you feel less than. And the other day I was thinking about, I was probably second grade, and I remember a classmate who didn't have a coat. She was wearing like a thin t-shirt. And I remember even at that age thinking, I hope I'm never the kid without a coat, because even if I didn't like my clothes, I had clothes. Mm-hmm. But if you don't fit in, that's another way of shaming and bullying, and you stand out and you don't quite fit with the norm. And so you really internalize that, and you really start to think there's something wrong with you, and from the outside, but also if your parents are like, if they're really wrapped up in their stuff, literally, and like your needs aren't met because of that, you are neglected, and you also feel like you're not worthy of maybe their attention or their love. And you just start to carry all that with you, and you start making decisions based on what you believe, even if you're not correct, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's that's the unfortunate part for every human being is that the environment that we grow up in the first 7 years of life becomes this is how life is supposed to be, even if it runs um, anti against your own nature, right? And it becomes very difficult, very problematic. Now, for somebody like you who grew up in a hoarding situation and then entered the military to get away from that, and as we all know, boot camp, quarter bounce off the mattress making the bed, it's a whole, I mean, we're talking not a 360, a whole 180 from that type of life, right? So then you've got these two different ways that it could be. You've been broken down and restructured into the military lifestyle, and then boom, thank you for your service, you're discharged. Where do you go? What do you do? Your head's going to explode. Who do you be in life? How can people deal with that?
It's really strange because at the time that I separated from the military, I had gotten married, and I had made that decision from a broken place, if you will. Like, I was able to find someone who continued to say, you're not valuable, you're not worthy, you're fat, your money is my money, and my money is my money. And so it like perpetuated this myth that I wasn't valuable and that I was stupid. And so I don't recommend that path. uh, but I think even at that point, I was like, I want to do something. I want to do something more. And I didn't know what. And I did a lot of different jobs. I worked for a state agency for 12 and a half years. But throughout that time, I went to college. I kind of forgot I was a veteran, if you will. I became a military spouse immediately, but I think that's what caused me to push away the veteran status, because you weren't quite as valuable now, as you weren't active duty. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's the way it is. Mm-hmm. And so now you're like a little less than again. And so I don't think I really I did go to the VA. I did go and get my rating. At that time, it took about a year. And so what I would say is, if you are separating, don't play that record in your head that says, oh, I shouldn't go to the VA and get benefits because that means I'm broken. Newsflash, we're all broken in some way. Use that as a way to stabilize your income. Use that to get your medical coverage, especially if you are not retired. I did not retire. I separated as an honorably discharged veteran. And so that is a different status than if you retire. And I encourage people to seek what you are qualified for. People, it's not welfare. It's you served, you earned, here's how this works. And so I hear a lot of people even now in the veteran community saying, don't seek those benefits. On the other hand, you hear people who do. And I think that you should not downplay what you went through or what you did, and that is a benefit to you. Yes, there's hoops and all that, but I think it's wise to pursue that. And you have your education benefits, and you have a housing voucher, not a voucher, but a guarantee if you buy a home. And so even for me, as a teenager, when I just enlisted, those were things in my head that I knew were benefits. And so I would say just kind of navigate to where you want to be, and don't focus on all the brokenness. But it's something that Annette Wittenberger talks about, our mess is our message. Mm-hmm. And I was in a a training over the weekend about your pain is your platform with Craig Duswalt. And I'm like, oh, I like that. I like both of those. But I think you can take your mess and your pain and put it on your platform. And that's how you connect with people. I was reading the article today about the adverse childhood experiences, ACEs, and how trauma plays such a role for you as a kid, and how everyone can make a difference. And so that is kind of one of my things where hoarding impacts everyone. You might just not know it yet. But so if you separate from the military, look at what's out there for you.
Right. Let's talk about how that impacts. For example, and I would love for you to share your personal experience about this, but from the outside, we know how childhood trauma changes how the brain develops, right? It creates pathways where someone who hasn't experienced that trauma has no pathways, right?
Right.
So growing up in a home where, you probably struggle to even have friends because your clothes aren't necessarily clean. Your kids don't want to stand too close to each other with one of the kids stinks kind of thing. Maybe, you would have loved to be involved with Girl Scouts, but that kind of, group thing just didn't seem safe. You can't invite people to come home with you after school for milk and cookies and do your homework together because it's just so embarrassing, the condition of your home. How does that inform how we create relationships as adults? So people can see a little bit of, you may not think this is really impacting you, but this is where it impacts.
It's very socially isolating to not be able to feel like you can have people into your home. For the first 7 years of my life that I can remember, that was not the case. We lived in town, we had running water, I went to school. It was kind of normal, if you will. We moved to a one-room cabin. We lived there for 4 years, and then we moved into a bigger house that was being built. And I was about 11 when that happened. And at that time, you could still navigate the house and cook and do things, but it started to spiral. There was always like too much stuff. And I did have friends. I was very selective about who I invited over because I didn't want to be teased about that at school or bullied. I was in church. I did do a lot of things that kept me away from the home. I think I learned early on that was a way to get out of there, find approvable activities so I could lead. It really made me really aware that I didn't live like everyone else. And I remember I had a friend over, her mom came to pick her up. And when she opened the door hit like the stack of egg cartons that were sitting there, empty, thankfully. And they tipped over. And I remember thinking, I will never invite people over again because I knew that lady. I'd been to her house. There is no way this was normal for her. So I remember making that decision that I'm not having people over. And I did a few times after that, but mostly I didn't because they didn't live that way. And so here's something, doorbell dread. That doorbell rings and you think, oh no, someone's here. And even though your house could be, most of us don't live in pristine houses, okay? That's a myth. Most of us don't live in a magazine. You're going to have dishes in your sink sometimes. You're going to have piles and laundry. But even if your house is as spotless as you can get it, that doorbell rings and you're the first thing you think is, oh no, someone's here.
Right.
And so it makes it difficult to be welcoming if you are fearing the judgment. And it's something I still have to work on personally to be like, oh, I invited them, or they don't really care if a dust bunny flies out from under the couch.
You remind me, and you remind me of a situation where we were driving and got my two daughters in the back seat, and I had picked my sister up at the airport, and my oldest daughter asked me, you know, why why we didn't clean the house before Aunt Marge came,
Mm,
right? And I looked and I told my daughter because, or no, why did we have to clean the house before Aunt Marge came? And I said, well, because it's polite, right? Aunt Marge really doesn't care what my house looks like, but it's
right.
polite to tidy up before guests arrive, right? And so that's a whole different, like situation there, right? Like that's quote unquote normal ish, right?
Right.
And then I totally get that idea of doorbell dread because from what you've explained to me, there's this whole background of I am so different and I am going to survive by not being seen and being under the radar and don't look over here because it's a mess. I'm going to go over here so you can look at me over here, but don't look at me where I live, right? Kind of thing. That's got to be so difficult to kind of stand up and go, that's not me. It's completely okay for me to have friends. It's completely okay for me to invite people in my space, and be seen and have friends and socialize because that past reality is not my present reality.
Right. And it's like, and I was thinking, I have something called a detachment guide, right? When you're detaching from your stuff, like the process you can go through.
Mm-hmm.
But just this morning, I was thinking about how that detachment applies to the relationship or the situation or the fact that you might go visit, but that's not your reality anymore. And a couple years ago, I had this conversation where my mom had said, "Oh, I put clean sheets on the bed in your room." And I said, "I appreciate that, but I don't live that way anymore. I won't sleep in that environment." And that was very hard for her to hear, I think, and it just magnifies the idea that they don't see what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And once you step away, I was 18. I had a chance to move out. Um, and I was fortunate because I had cleaned houses and done laundry and things like that. That's how I did make money as a teenager and babysat kids and stuff. So that was what I did. But I had a pretty good understanding of over here is not how most people live. And so I think I was always in this state of how do I get back to normal? How do I get back to having a space that has running water? And it was always kind of a joke when I was a kid because once I was a teenager, I had an upstairs room and I laid down a remnant of carpet. I had a bed. I had very basic, minimal stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't let anybody bring their stuff in my space. Like, no camping things, no box, nothing. And so for me, clutter is very anxiety producing. And I didn't realize that. And I didn't know but I was creating a space where I could live
Mm-hmm.
by having a room that had no crap in it, essentially. And if you're lucky enough to have a whole room, I recommend setting those boundaries. So you can have some sanity because it's like your needs didn't matter. But once I figured out what I needed, then I went for it. And even then I had people say, "Oh, stay here and go to college." I'm like, you don't understand. Like high school is prison. When it's over, I'm leaving. And that was kind of my whole thing, like staying here more and still being judged and lumped with this was not something I could tolerate. And so that was a huge incentive to get away. And I think, like you mentioned in the beginning, a lot of people go into the military or something like that to get away and like define who you are separately. And I didn't really tell anyone my experiences when I was in the military. I just never talked about it because they didn't have to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now I go to totally unrelated conferences and whatever. I say 2 sentences about what I talk about, and someone's telling me their story. Someone's telling me their experience with some kind of dysfunction. Mm-hmm. Frequently it is hoarding, but it isn't always that. And that's what I think what you're doing, what I'm doing, what other people are doing in this space is providing space for people to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So they know they're not alone. So they know that while it can be hard, you can survive. Like you can actually move beyond all that drama in a way. It's still there. It still shaped your brainwave. It still shapes how you think. But once you're aware of it, that's when you can start shifting your mindset and what you do, and can review the relationships in your life and decide if they're ones that you need, or how you will operate and what your boundaries are in there. And I think that's what you have to figure out. And I'm like old now, and I can't say I had it figured out in my 20s. It took me a while. But that doesn't mean you can't do it. You just have to figure out, what are you trying to create? What are you trying to do? And move toward that. I was probably 12, and I had a church leader say to me, I remember this conversation. I'm sitting at the dock at a lake, and I said, I don't want to be like this. And she said, well, focus on what you do want. Mm-hmm. And I got it, and I did do it. But now that I'm older, I appreciate it even more. Yeah. That an adult took the time to hear me and was able to say, focus on what you want. Mm-hmm.
That is, yeah, that right there is the key to the universe. It sounds so simple, but it is the key to the universe. Focus on what you want, right? Awesome. Well, I want to acknowledge you for bringing your experience, strength, and hope to bear on the quote-unquote brokenness of the world, because you're absolutely right. We are all broken to a certain extent. But we gotta, but that's, I can't even put it into words.
Embracing it is good.
Yeah, that's the whole point, because your pattern of fractures is unique, and you can share so many aspects of yourself with so many different people that can relate with that one aspect. You know, adversity builds character, and I have met so many amazing, sparkling souls that have put themselves together after being shattered, like yourself, that, you know, that brings joy to my life to talk to you guys. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It just gives me the chills when it's like I recognize it's so easy to see broken, but when you start to realize that broken is, or I like a mosaic. Like you have to pull it apart and then you put it back together and it's still beautiful in its own way. Mm-hmm. And that's how I feel about so many people that I meet. I'm like, look at everything you went through. Not only did you survive, but now you're thriving and you're impacting other people positively. And when people talk about business, of course, the money, duh, but the impact is where it for me, that's where it's all worth it, is having that positive impact. Seeing someone go, oh, I don't have to live this way. Or, oh, that's how I could do this. And just seeing that shift is what I love about just about any interaction I have, is when you see that shift happen for that person. And you're like, oh, look, there's another person has hope, you know?
It's so rewarding, isn't it? I wish we could get the electric company to accept hope as payment, because I'd just be out here just throwing hope around.
Woo, like confetti, you know?
Right. That would be nice. But yeah, I totally get it because it's not you. We if you're doing this for the money, it's not fun. When you're doing
No, and
this
I
for the
can't believe how
fun,
much fun I have.
right? When you're
Like,
doing this
I'm
for the
like, wow,
fun,
this is awesome.
yeah, exactly. Now we talked about a like a little giveaway thing. Was it the affirmation sheet?
So, yes, and I have it's a PDF and I call it like an I am sheet.
Mm-hmm.
But and I know some people are like, "Oh, affirmations." Well, that's the start. You have to start shifting your mindset. Then you have to do things. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't just like write it all day. You have to do things. But like I remember feeling like I was stupid. Like I had this in my head that I was dumb and math was hard. It was hard, but that doesn't mean I was dumb because I did well in so many other subjects.
Mm-hmm.
But I had this belief that I was stupid. And it wasn't until I started to say, wow, someone told me that. Somewhere I believed that. And it wasn't until I started to say things like, well, I'm intelligent. I am smart. I am wise. I am kind. And it wasn't until I started taking those negative things and flipping them
Mm-hmm.
into something positive that I started to realize that maybe I'm not stupid. Maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that those people are wrong.
Right.
And later I went to school and I went to college and I did all this stuff that I think to kind of prove to myself that I wasn't dumb.
Right.
And so it's a very simple thing, but it's basically paying attention to that self-talk and noting when you're saying something negative and saying, well, what if that's not true? What if I am smart, but maybe this subject is hard for me?
Mm-hmm.
And if I have to get through it, what can I do? Do I need to revisit it? Should I have a tutor? Is there some way I can navigate that? But on the other hand, maybe you just say, I'm a bad daughter, or I'm not a good, a good parent.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe if you stop and go, but maybe I struggle here, but maybe I am attending the Zoom school with them. I am cooking them nutritious meals. Their clothes are clean. Like focusing on all the things you're doing right. But essentially, you don't have to qualify to be valuable. You just are.
Yeah.
And once you start to realize that, you can take those negatives. Like people will say, don't quit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your brain doesn't process don't. We don't understand it. But if I have a poem that my grandma gave me years ago that said, don't quit. Well, I improved it and I called it keep going because that resonates more for me, that you just keep going and you keep going. And there's a quote, Sir Winston Churchill, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Right.
If it's hell, why do I want to stay here?
Right.
Like, what path can I take? And there's a podcast I listened to not that long ago where a lady talked about how every time she wanted to give up, something showed up or someone to help her get to the next one and the next one and the next. And that's exactly how I feel. Like every time I wonder what the hell, something else shows up that just pushes me to the next thing, or is an introduction to the next person, or another person who needs some kind of assistance. Ever since we talked about the word help and assistance, I've really oh, no, assist would be a better word here. So I think that's what we're here for. Like there's some other quote about we're all just walking each other home.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you don't like home? Maybe you have to address that, but I would not be here without the support of so many people. Like you start to list them and then you're like, okay, I listed 40, but I probably forgot 100,
Yeah, I've been experiencing the same thing. It's like I'm looking through like my friends list, right? I want 10 people and that I don't know, and I'm looking through and I'm going, no, I know them. And we're like really getting like connected. It's been amazing. So Will you put the link to that I am sheet in the description or in the comments for people to
Yes,
grab
I'll
that
put it in
after the
there.
show? Fantastic. Just one little thing that I wanted to add in with those I am statements, because for years, I've been working on with what I call directive affirmations. Um,
Mm,
because I just want to remind people that, you know, affirmations like, I am a millionaire in the making, don't work and actually backfire on you if you can't get some sort of conscious agreement with that phrase. So, for example, like Tammy was just talking about, you have the phrase, I'm dumb, right? You actually have to take a look and go, where can I refute this bullshit? Sorry.
exactly.
Okay? No, I'm actually pretty good at words. I'm actually pretty good at photography. I'm actually can do some pretty complicated things. So maybe I'm not dumb. Maybe I'm learning more and more every day. Boom. There's your directive affirmation.
Right.
I am learning more and more every day. Because if you can't get energetically and passionately behind it as it's got a kernel of truth in it, then you're setting yourself up to torture yourself mentally. Don't do that. Make sense?
I agree. And it's the I'm already doing it. I'm learning is an active thing that you're
Mm-hmm.
doing, you know?
Yes.
So taking that active part and being, and then, and like when you're looking at financial goals, that also has to be like believable, you know? You have to have some, I would say you want a number you're driving toward, but it needs to be something that like you believe
Mm-hmm.
is actually possible.
Yeah.
And so, like, and the other piece I would say is sometimes you decide that I'm learning. Maybe you don't quite believe it,
Mm-hmm.
but you decide, no, that's actually, I'm a learner. That's what I do. And you just start taking actions that support that
Mm-hmm.
belief that you are trying to create.
Yeah. 100% on board with that. Absolutely. That is, and that's another thing that I think we should like highlight. You have to take actions that support the affirmation you're trying to bring in. And like you
Yes.
said, you can't just sit there and write lines all day. You can't, you can't play tug of war with the universe. When you put it out there, you let it go, you watch what shows up, and you take the next right step to make it
And
happen.
it's amazing. People say, don't worry about the how. And I do sometimes think I need the how, like the systems and stuff, but the you just kind of put it out there and then you just do those aligned actions, whatever that means. And that I think you learn it. I mean, there's a lot of people that I've followed and taken a class and done this and journaled and written, and there's a lot of that behind the scenes stuff that you do to get ready so you can be out here.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I understood that when I was younger. Like all
Yeah.
that behind the scenes work matters, maybe even more so that you can be prepared for whatever
That
comes
is
up.
definitely, I totally see that. And sometimes it's a very zigzag path. So
Yes.
the next right thing to do might look like it has nothing to do with what you think you want to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up moseying through the corn maze and coming out with, oh my God, how did this get here? It wasn't the path I expected at all, right? And I'm in the
Mm-hmm.
middle of that right now because I'm a resilience coach. I was getting ready to launch my first, like full 4 week to 4 month program. And I was a week out from it when the pandemic got called and quarantine got everything
Mm.
shut down. And I zigzagged into doing this type of thing. And the response to it was so uh, overwhelming, like amazing, that I'm now doing like 3 different podcasts and out there in a whole new way that really wasn't a whole new way considering I went to college for journalism. right?
Well,
So, yeah.
yes, and that whole thing has, I mean, this everything has shifted so much, and then, but it's also brought these really amazing opportunities, like you're saying, the different podcasts and the Zoom call and the all the things going on. And I think in some ways it's made people more willing to do it, to like listen to what you're trying to do, and they're like, oh, maybe I could assist with that.
Yeah.
You know, maybe there's a way for us to work together. And I think for some people it's really opened more doors than it's closed, if you will.
Yeah.
But
I would agree
I,
with that. I think there's an opening that was made by, we have no idea what the future is supposed to be anymore. What
right.
can it be?
Mm-hmm.
Right? As opposed to, before it was like, time to make the donuts, gonna get up and do the same thing today that I did last week, that I did the month before, that I did 3 years ago, And we used to have this, I know what the future holds. This is what is gonna be going on. And that's been taken out of our space entirely. And now there's like, I have no idea how this is gonna go. Ooh, does that mean I get to create how it's going to go? Yes, it
exactly.
does. It does. So get to it. Awesome. Well, I could stay here and chat with you forever, Tammi, and our private phone calls reflect that.
We have good conversations.
Yes,
I like that.
So I highly encourage our audience, anybody who's watching today, reach out to Tammi, have a great conversation with her, pick up that IM PDF that she's offering in the comments. It should be available within like 10-15 minutes. And once again, Tammi, thank you so much for doing what it is that you're doing. You are a courageous soul to put your personal experiences out here for the benefit that it can bring to others. And that's nothing that shouldn't go unacknowledged, and it's not a small thing. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gail. I appreciate that.
Awesome. All right, everybody, have a great time, and we'll see you again soon in the Your Life Reimagined group. Oh, also, make sure that you reach out and make a purchase from the October Sparkle Party for Sharon Bevan. You have to make a purchase in order to be one of the people that I could choose to give the points and perks to, so do it. All right, guys, have a great week. Thanks again, Tammi. See you all later.
Thank you, Gail.